It's time to take a ride on the Steelers Afternoon Drive with our co-hosts, Alan Saunders and Zachary Smith.
Welcome back to another episode of Steelers Afternoon Drive. I'm Zachary Smith. That is Alan Saunders on this trade deadline Tuesday. Literally the only thing that is going on today. Alan, how are we doing?
Our long national nightmare is over. Or maybe more appropriately, if we want to go even more political, ladies and gentlemen, we got him. The Steelers finally traded for a wide receiver. Smitty, we don't have to talk about the Steelers trading for a wide receiver for at least 10 months.
I voted.
I voted.
Did you like that? If you follow
good.
me on Twitter, I tweeted a picture of our sticker and said I voted because it's sticker day as well when it's election day. But yes, and it's a receiver that we had mentioned in the past, but I feel like the steam had kind of cooled on that one just because of Alan Lazard getting hurt, the Jets winning a game within there, kind of getting back into the mix in an AFC where, like 3 wins has you in the mix right now in the AFC with the shape of it. So Mike Williams coming over from the Jets for a 5th round pick. This is one of those cases to me, Alan, that we were kind of talking about, like, were there better players available? Well, that ended up getting traded today. Not really in terms of wide receivers, but, along the line, were there better players available? Sure. But if you're just looking at the body type of a receiver, what he could bring to the offense, the fit certainly makes sense. So what are we at with this? I know that was kind of your thought process as well, but what do you make of this now that this actually has gone down?
Yeah, I mean, certainly this isn't Brandon Ayuk, right? It's not Devontae Adams either. It's a player on the back half of his career who certainly looks like he's diminished physically from his peak, coming off a major knee injury last year. Doesn't really look like he has the same explosiveness that we saw from Mike Williams in the days when he was with the Los Angeles Chargers. But he's still a really good player. He's still a player that is really good at exactly what the Steelers need. This is sort of like, if you didn't get the best thing, but it was like the thing that it was exactly fit all of the requirements. And I think that is what Mike Williams does for the Steelers. He did not, he did not break the bank. He didn't cost very much in terms of draft capital. He's not going to cost anything in terms of cap space, $627,500 for the rest of the season. He is a pending free agent, so it doesn't impact their future decision with George Pickens in any kind of negative way. It's just a rental. It's a cheap one, and he provides what they need on the field. He is a contested catch, go ball, sideline merchant, and I think what he provides really lets the Steelers do 3 things on this offense. One, it lets them diversify where they're throwing those deep shots. They're going to make the deep safety think about more than just George Pickens. They might even make some teams play with 2 deep safeties and take a guy out of the box and take some of that pressure off Najee Harris, or take a defender away from Pat Freiermuth and open things up that way. So that's the first thing. Okay. The second thing is it's going to let George Pickens be more than that. Like, we had talked all offseason about wanting to see how much better George Pickens can be. Can he become a complete number 1 wide receiver and not just be this deep ball guy, but do everything? And on some levels, we haven't really found that out because nobody else on this team can be the deep ball guy. So it's had to be George Pickens. And so we kind of have an incomplete grade in terms of whether George Pickens can become that player we thought he might become, because the Steelers have had to use him in the ways they've used him in the past because there hasn't been a compliment. And the third thing, the thing that you and I have been talking about for a really long time, it answers the question, what on earth happens to this offense if George Pickens gets hurt? Obviously, Mike Williams is not the same caliber player, but he can do the same things. He at least provides someone that is capable of being used in the way the Steelers offense has been using George Pickens to this point in the season. Is he a bona fide wide receiver 2 at this point? Probably not. Is he going to get Van Jefferson off the team and off the planet like Steelers fans want him? No, but I think he is, at worst, they're in a 3-way tie as the Steelers wide receiver 2 now, but bringing a very different and very necessary skill set to that equation.
Yeah, I was going to bring up the injury insurance thing yet again, just because I feel like that's kind of an undersold talking point when you talk about this receiver search. Because to me, again, the conversation didn't change from them needing a receiver, but with what Calvin Austin's been able to do, it kind of changed for me in terms of the type of receiver that I thought that they should have been looking for. Like it took Adam Thielen or a player like that kind of out of the mix for me. And I'm glad that the Steelers went this route as opposed to Adam Thielen, which, by the way, I had gotten a text about that, which what they gave up for Mike Williams was what Carolina was asking for Adam Thielen. Now, could they have ended up negotiating there and gotten to a talking point where the Steelers would have been more okay with? But from what I had heard, Carolina was looking for the 2025 fifth for Adam Thielen, and the Steelers weren't willing to do that. Got Mike Williams for that same pick. So, I think that this was the smarter route for them to go in terms of what this team needed on a guy that can play on the outside, obviously offers a little bit of injury insurance. But Alan, having watched Mike Williams, we saw him against the Steelers, only had one catch in that game. But just like from a physical standpoint, I feel like he's looked healthier as we've gone on here in the season. And that should be expected as, he gets further and further away from when that injury took place. But do you have hope not only for obviously what he offers just in terms of a guy that can just stretch the field or those contested catches, but like in terms of the production within this offense, that like, is it reasonable to expect that he should do more here than he was doing with the Jets?
I think he's a better fit for what the Steelers are doing than what the Jets were doing. I mean, Aaron Rodgers was doing the try to throw the ball in 0.5 seconds thing, and that's not really what Mike Williams is good at. Like, he is a better fit for what the Steelers are doing. Is that going to turn into a lot more production? I don't know. It's hard to say. I just think it gives the Steelers a lot more of a balanced and varied offensive attack. How much they're going to use Mike Williams probably depends on the way teams are going to attack it. Are they going to back off George Pickens now? Well, because if they are, then it doesn't matter if Mike Williams never catches the ball. It's a good trade. Like if the presence of Mike Williams gives George Pickens more opportunities, or Pat Freiermuth more opportunities, or Najee Harris more opportunities to run against lighter boxes, then it doesn't matter if he never catches the ball. Like, it doesn't need production to have impact. I think the level of production here is still very much up in the air. I mean, I think he'll be more impactful than Van Jefferson has been to this point, but that's obviously a very low bar. I'm not expecting like 500 yards here. I would keep things pretty muted, but I do think, if he can be good for one or two big plays a game and have those other impacts on the offense like I'm talking about, I think that can be a big deal.
It's easy to say. I feel like on the surface, Van Jefferson's the guy that kind of loses out on this deal. But is the winner of this? Is it Russ? Is it George? Is it all the above? Like, who are the winners in your mind of this deal?
Arthur Smith, man. I mean, I think like he's been so hamstrung by what he can show us with this offense by the personnel they had available to them. And not to say that Mike Williams is like solving every personnel problem with the wide receiver room. It's not, but I think it gives him a much more representative of a typical NFL wide receiver room talent pool to work with, where he's not like we should not see any more go balls to Scotty Miller the rest of the year, where like it's just very clearly like, round peg, square hole, like with where Arthur Smith's head is about what he wants to do and the people he has available to him. And I'll tell you, the other winner here is Omar Khan, because I mean, this thing had gone on for so long. I think the heat was starting to turn up a little bit on Omar about trading away Deontay Johnson, never really finding a replacement. Not saying Mike Williams is a one-to-one replacement, but he could not let this trade deadline pass without making some kind of move at wide receiver. I think he understood that. I said, was it last week we talked that it would be okay to overpay? That's how sort of desperate they should feel about this position. I do think this was a slight overpayment, but
I was going to ask you next.
Yeah, like I think like Omar, and imagine if Omar had not made a move, the reaction to that, and then if Pickens had gotten hurt. Like,
yeah, right.
People would have been rightfully furious about that. And so I think, to me, the two big winners are what can Art Smith show us now that he's got a full deck of cards, and Omar sort of undoing, at least to a measure, the big, to me, the one of the few mistakes he's made in his 10 years still as general manager.
I know that you're familiar with Mock Draftable, or I assume that you are. It's a website that combines combine based data, and it's just interesting to see like comparisons for guys. But for Mike Williams, it's very interesting because if I list some of the names, you're going to notice a theme here: Drake London, Matt Collins, Corey Davis. Oddly enough, Limas Sweet is on this list.
No way. Drake London, and Corey Davis.
Yep, all guys that have played with Arthur Smith. So, I feel like going back to I put out a post on a tweet, not a post. Come on, Zach. I put out a tweet in free agency when we learned of the Mike Williams interest and said, I feel like this is an Arthur Smith thing because of the type of receiver that he is and that having that information. So with this being the case now, yeah, it certainly makes sense. Like you just said, Arthur Smith has a type of receiver that he has thrived with in the past.
And I think Russell Wilson will thrive with him. Like, I just think it's a perfect marriage of what Arthur Smith wants to do, what Russell Wilson's good at, and what Mike Williams is good at. They all line up. Russell Wilson is the best quarterback, but he's a good quarterback for Arthur Smith's system. Mike Williams isn't the best wide receiver or even really a good wide receiver, but he's very good at the things that Arthur Smith and Russell Wilson want to do.
From the standpoint of, like you said, you felt like it may be a slight overpay within that. A 2025 fifth, just directly going back, like not a pick swap or anything like that, just a pick going back the other way. What was your thought? Do you feel like that is a slight overpay? Was it more than you expected Mike Williams to go for? Where are we at?
Yeah, both of those things. I do think it's slight overpay when you look at what DeAndre Hopkins went for, which was not very much more. And I think in retrospect, the Steelers should have made that deal instead. I said that at the time. And obviously they could not trade for Deontay Johnson, but what Deontay Johnson was traded for, a much better player who does much more than Mike Williams, was traded for far less into the same division, into Baltimore. And so I think when you look at the comparative moves, it's probably an overpay. The Steelers not having a 6th-round pick may have complicated that. They have to keep the pick that they have available to them for to finish out the Justin Fields trade, which will either be a 6th or a 4th. I do think there's some complications there, but yeah, I was basically, the other part of this is I do think, and we talked about here, is that the Jets keeping Mike Williams was a very realistic option. With Alan Lazard hurt, they're not out of it. Aaron Rodgers does not care about the draft pick at all anyway, and he's really the one making the big decisions in New York. And so, the fact that he was okay with this, I don't know where that came from, or maybe Mike Williams did at some point express a desire to be traded after they got Devontae Adams. That hasn't been reported. That's just a thought. But I think, the idea that the Jets could keep him was
you had to make it enticing to some level. Sure.
Yeah, they had to overcome that. And like I said, I don't think Omar could let this go without making a deal. So I think they had to do it. I do think it was a slight overpay. I would have pegged his value at closer to a 7th or a pick swap than a 5th. But I think it was a move they had to make. I don't think they were in a position where they could quibble about, what amounts to not very much in the difference of day 3 draft picks.
Yeah. And I feel like, there's almost like this level that the two things meet at for me, where it's like, I don't think he's completely washed, but he's certainly not the player that he used to be. I think that there were more talented options, at least that we had talked about, certainly. But at the same time, if you're just talking about the fit of the player, I think that's where those two roads kind of meet for me, where I can get on board with this being the guy that they ultimately landed.
Yeah. Yeah. I totally agree there.
Anything else to add before we jump to the other trade that they made? Didn't necessarily expect to see a second move coming, but anything else to add on Mike Williams before we go to the other?
No, I don't think so. Just other than I had someone ask me about like the rest of the wide receiver room, I expect that we'll keep all the rest of the other 4 wide receivers and have a 5-man mix going forward. So Scotty Miller, Van Calvin, and George, I think we'll all stick around. Nobody's going to be cut or anything like that because of this. Now, when Roman Wilson comes back, maybe that's a different story.
Gotcha. Okay. So a second move made by the Pittsburgh Steelers. And it's interesting because we were getting some comments, like, could they add an offensive lineman? Could they add, you brought up a defensive tackle, obviously with the situation with Monty Adams. Could they have some insurance there? They have just Fehoko right now on the practice squad behind a Keanu Benton, but they go edge, looking for edge depth here. Preston Smith coming over from the Green Bay Packers, a guy that's not necessarily, maybe not a name that a lot of people in the football world certainly know. Very well accomplished, 8 sacks just last year, only has 2.5 sacks this year, still plays the run at a very high level. You could see that Green Bay was kind of turning the page there, but this is interesting for the Steelers, a team that's always, I feel like, wanted to have 4 guys, right? Whether, like, this is almost as if this is their answer for Marcus Golden retiring, I feel like.
Marcus Golden retiring and DeMarvin Leal being out for the year. I feel like
absolutely
things that kind of happened there. And to me, also, this is the this is the Philadelphia Eagles, Andy Weidel influence, right? Where the Eagles, no matter how good their defensive line is, they just rotate those guys. Like they always came at you with 8 players deep across that front. And I think the Steelers are trying to replicate that, where they can have TJ Watt and Alex Highsmith come off and it not be a big drop off. And Preston Smith started all 9 games for the Packers this season, 17-23, 17-22, 16-21. He hasn't missed a game ever in his entire NFL career. He has 138 starts, 68.5 career sacks, and that guy might be outside linebacker 3 or 4. I mean, unclear to me where he falls in the pecking order with a healthy Nick Herbig, but dang, like that is some outstanding depth for the Steelers at outside linebacker. Not something I think they were coming into this trade deadline feeling like they absolutely needed.
I like your analogy, by the way.
It's, you're at the grocery store, man. This thing's not on your list, but that is a deal that you can't pass up, and it's one of your favorites. And we know the Steelers love them some outside linebackers. It's like, oh, I got to get that. Put that in the cart for a 7th round pick in a draft class where the Steelers have 3 of them. It's basically free. This is, you're familiar with girl math. This is boy math. Okay. This is football boy math. If you have 3 7th round picks and you trade one of them, you've lost nothing. Okay. It doesn't even count. It's like you didn't trade anything at all.
Yeah, absolutely. The other part of this, I don't think that either of us or literally anybody else that has any knowledge of an NFL contract expect that Preston Smith would play out following this year on his current contract with the non-guaranteed money that remains on it. But as it stands right now, he has 2 more years following this year currently under contract.
Yeah, so he's got 2 more years. They're not going to happen. There's no guaranteed money beyond this season. He's owed about $2 million for the rest of this year. And then, I mean, it's not a lot of money. It's basically and then, they can renegotiate it. They can cut him and move on, whatever they want to do after this year. Obviously he's not going to play on that contract for anybody going forward. And, I had somebody ask me, why did the Packers want to trade him? Obviously the Packers, sort of in the hunt there in the NFC North, certainly not a team that's like, tanking or something like that, like the Giants are or the Jets. And Lucas Van Ness was a first round pick of theirs. They want to get in the lineup, and I think Preston Smith was a guy that was kind of getting in the way of that. A player they respected, maybe so much that they didn't want to bench him, but felt like if they could get something for him, that was better than him sitting around doing nothing. And they want to play the younger guy.
Yeah. Certainly that, and from a financial perspective, they obviously have some savings that will take place, following that move. So, I don't know how you could be upset about this one to any degree. Like, I understand if people are like, Mike Williams was an overpayment or anything like that, but like, what could somebody possibly have to say about this deal on the negative end?
Nothing. I have literally nothing.
I think it's a really good fit, even like the type of player that he is as well. And I think it's a nice contrast, like a bigger body.
They had been a 3-4 team for so long, now playing a 4-3. Yeah. I think Preston Smith is a better fit as a stand-up outside linebacker.
Yeah. Yeah. And like I said, somebody that's played the run very well, obviously has had the sack production. Not so much this year, just 2.5 sacks, but 8 as recently as last year. And yeah, hard to have any type of gripe with this move, Alan. Anything else specifically with that one?
No. We can transition from here to the next one, because I was thinking that this might be the end of the road for Jeremiah Moon, and it's not. Okay. He's sticking around as the 5th outside linebacker. Obviously, we've seen his special teams contributions. They've been impressive, and I thought he's played well enough when he was asked to get in there. And Jeremiah Moon kind of gets through at least the first wave of cuts. There are going to be more as the Steelers get some guys back from the injured reserve list in the next coming weeks. But Rodney Williams, the one guy the Steelers had to make at least one move today with the 2 additions. Rodney Williams gets cut. Tough break. A guy who's been playing really, really well. I think is an NFL player. I think someone should claim him. I don't know if they will. It's a tough day to go on waivers with a lot of teams needing to make moves, but tough break because I think he's been playing really good on special teams for the Steelers. And I've always thought that if they had just given him a greater chance at tight end, that he could have shown something. But they obviously have good players they like in front of him. So for now, Moon sticks around as a four-phase special teamer and Hot Rod hitting waivers, and we'll see if he's able to make it through to the practice squad.
Pour one out for Hot Rod. It was like 8 days. You know what? It might have been my fault. 8 days ago, that little interaction that I mentioned on the field. That could have been.
Well, and our five guys comments didn't help. It's all us, really.
Yeah. So if this gets back, we apologize, Hot Rod, for that. But all the best to you.
Hot Rod, if I see him again.
Okay.
Soon. I don't know if he gets claimed on waivers, I might not.
Yeah. So
unless by Washington, and I'll see him on Sunday.
That would certainly be something. I mean, it's tough because for him, I hope that he does almost.
Yeah.
Like you hope that he's able to carve out.
That I always kind of tell him like, hey, sorry you're back. Like, I'm glad you're back because I like you and I like working with you, but that's got to hurt the pride a little bit to get cut after you're playing well and then clear waivers. And nobody wants it. I mean, that's the bottom line. So
just a couple other botches to check here in terms of what they did with the roster. Andy Isabella and Craig Young also waived from the practice squad. Neither one of those guys spent too much time here. Not too much to say about that, and I would imagine you kind of feel the same way.
Craig Young, a little bit interesting, played like some hybrid linebacker safety at Kansas. Andy Isabella, I mean, the one
didn't get off to a great start, and
it was not a great start.
Let's take a little bit of a whip around with some of the other moves that took place today that, kind of impacted the Steelers, honestly, when you go down and look at these in a lot of ways. Even like Marshawn Lattimore going to Washington, right? Like normally that wouldn't impact the Steelers, but the Steelers have the Commanders next on the schedule. He's been dealing with a hamstring injury. Is he going to be able to work his way back into the fold, jump on a moving train with a new team that quickly while also dealing with that hamstring injury? Will certainly be interesting to see. But guys kind of have a way, right, of getting healthy all of a sudden when they move teams. So we'll see if we see Marshawn Lattimore. But what's your take on that move?
I mean, I think it's interesting that the Commanders are kind of going for it, not a big trade in terms of draft pick, but that might have been the biggest. Was that the biggest draft pick?
I would say so.
Trade
a 3, 3, 4, and a 6 for Lattimore and a 5.
Yeah. I think that was the biggest deal of the day. I'm kind of impressed that they're going for it. I think they have good ownership. I think that it's not a David Tepper situation where like the new guy comes in and wants to screw everything up. It's competent owners. They own the Devils and the Sixers, and they're well, maybe I shouldn't say good things about competent ownership in the Sixers right now, but things aren't going well in Philly. But I just think it's a smart move. Like you look at a down NFC East. Generally, like the Giants are awful. The Cowboys looking like they have a lost season. The Eagles look beatable. Why shouldn't the Commanders go for it? I think it's an impressive move. I don't know how much of a difference it's going to make this week, but I'd step on the gas when you're ahead. I like it.
Absolutely. I mean, when you have a QB that you feel obviously very good about, probably better than you thought you were going to right away, you're going to have that guy in a rookie deal. And, when you have that opportunity, I feel like you got to capitalize on it. To your point, like that window that you thought, maybe this window opens in like a couple of years when we see what Jaden is. 8 games into this thing, it's wide open. So,
like the windows in my house on an 80-degree day in November, it is wide open.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's stick with the corner talk, I guess. We'll talk about the Baltimore Ravens here going out and getting Trey White, a once very good corner for the Buffalo Bills. There's been a fall from grace there for Trey White. I don't know if it's just, all the injuries that have piled up, kind of like sapping him completely of his athleticism or what is going on there. But like, he's kind of a guy that's always been mainly a zone corner, never really the guy that's going to press up and get in your face. That wasn't his strong suit. But he goes to the Ravens here in a 7th round pick swap going from 2025 to 2026. So what do we make of this move? Do the Ravens get better? Is this really just like them giving up nothing and praying that he's some type of solution for them? To me, I was more surprised. No edge rush move from the Ravens here, and instead opting to get some corner help.
I feel like the Ravens do a really good job of like resuscitating random defensive players, like Kyle Van Noy. was like doing nothing and was out of the league, and then all of a sudden, like, he's back in Baltimore and now like back to playing really good football. I feel like some of their corners,
even honestly, like I feel like people were saying that about Marcus Peters when he went there too.
Marcus Peters, Calais Campbell when he went there. I think very the same. It was like somebody that kind of the league had given up on a little bit. And Ronald Darby, like, he didn't turn into a great player, but like I just think there's something about the way the Ravens do things on defense. Jadeveon Clowney went there at a not so great point in his career, and then went on to bigger and better things. I think they're good at this, and so I think it's a good move for them. I'm not sure that there was a big market for Tre'Davious White, but and obviously the pick swap here of this was a 2026 7th. And then a 2025 going back. Yeah, I mean, that's the smallest thing you can possibly trade, I think, legally. And so obviously it shows that there wasn't a lot of market there, but I think this is a good bet by the Ravens. They're good at this.
Yeah, that's a good point for sure. And I don't know how he's going to be deployed. And again, if you're giving up nothing, I guess why not? I was just surprised that they didn't also leave today with an edge rusher. So there's that. Running back market, Khalil Herbert going to the Bengals, Zach Moss going to be out for some period of time. So Khalil Herbert, who certainly had some time with the Bears where he's looked like a very good player, now going to Cincinnati to pair with Chase Brown, who's looked very good in his own right, certainly. But what do we make of this move? What did Cincinnati get in Herbert?
I've always liked Khalil Herbert. I thought he was pretty underutilized. He's a guy that I think can be better than his numbers have shown. I've always thought that. He was like the guy I wanted the Steelers to draft in 2021 instead of taking Najee Harris in the first round. I thought he could have been a really good player. And, if you look at his like career, not having a great year this year, not really being used, but like he had 5.7 yards per carry year in 2022. He had like 20 catches last year. And so I think he's like a versatile back that can do a lot. You pair him with a Chase Brown. I think that's a really nice, like, I don't think the Bengals are losing much here in going from Moss and Brown to Herbert and Brown, because I think Brown was the best back of those three anyway.
Yeah, no, I agree for sure. I mean, the way that he's looked, I was almost, I get that you need somebody to obviously take some touches away, and it's not like they gave up a ton to get him. What was it, a 7th round pick, I think, there as well. So, to go get another back, I guess, to spell Chase Brown, that makes sense. But Chase Brown certainly looks like he's the main back and will be going forward there. And then this move has been talked about, I feel like, for weeks. Zadarius Smith going to the Lions. Ever since they lost Aiden Hutchinson, they've been on the search for some pass rush help. Zadarius Smith going from the Browns to there always seemed to make the most sense. Some people were shooting for the stars, obviously, with like a mega move for a Myles Garrett or a Max Crosby, which were never going to happen. Zadarius Smith was always the pass rusher that was going to be moved. The Lions made the most sense. What do we make of that fit, and what does that mean for the Browns going forward?
Yeah, I mean, I think it hurts what the Browns can do to get Myles Garrett weak matchups. Like, teams are going to spend more time, more energy on him. I thought the bringing Zadarius Smith was really a game changer there. I still think the Browns defense should be so much better than it is. I don't really understand why they've struggled so badly. So a tough year for AFC North defense, man. We've talked about it, but the other three Steelers are the only one carrying the banner for that particular brand right now. The other three are way down the bottom of the league in terms of points and yards and that type of thing. And so I think the struggles are going to continue for the Browns. I think, maybe there was, I know they were forced basically to be committed to Watson, but I think maybe internally there was a thought of like, well, maybe Jameis will save the season. Like, weirder things have happened. Mason Rudolph saved the Steelers season last year. Like, who knows? Maybe even if he's not good, he'll just get hot and go on a run. And then, obviously a struggle last week. And I think that was sort of the last dash of hope there for this year for the Browns.
Yeah, I mean, I think even if they were probably thinking about last year back to what Flacco did for them, and thinking just Stefanski can do this with anybody, as long as it's not Deshaun Watson. But I think last week was a good indication that's not the case. To your point, it is very weird because it's just like guys that you wouldn't expect. Like Martin Emerson's had a terrible year after looking the way that he did last year. Greg Newsome was a name that was thrown out there at the trade deadline, going for like a 7th round pick. That didn't obviously end up happening, but that's how people were like valuing him this year at the deadline. So yeah, like I just feel like there's been decline from players they're not like super old, so it's not due to age. Like, what is the reason that's happening? I don't know, but
I mean,
I'm not upset about it.
Been hurt, and that's like a big piece in the middle of their defense, but it's not like they're like decimated by injuries or something either.
Yeah, absolutely. Anything else to kind of wrap up what we saw happen here on trade deadline day?
NFL, do not ever do this again. With the trade deadline.
Yeah, how are you gonna, if they are gonna have it was this just a 1-year trial to see what push it back, or is
this was a change? So I mean, 3 years from now, Art, we're going to the owners' meetings and we're fixing this at the now. I don't care. Next year, it's like Judge, who whatever. But even in 2 years, when it's a federal election, this is a bad idea. The whole point of doing this for the NFL was to get more publicity for its trade deadline and to move it back in the year so that teams would make more moves. Give it another week. Give it another week. You'll get even more moves and you'll get even more publicity. But it's
also like it didn't get paid off with that like blockbuster deal happening either. Like,
no, I didn't really expect it to. I mean, this was. Have you seen a total? I don't know if I saw a total for today, but I think it was. I have 9 here. If so, that's the second most trades on deadline day in NFL history.
Okay.
So I mean, it's not been a big deal like for very long.
Yeah. Right. But I just was saying like that one move specifically today happening to be like, this is why we moved it back or whatever. Like it didn't even get that payoff from today. Like Marshawn Lattimore, the best player that won today, round 3 pick headlining the return back. But all right. Well, if you don't have anything else, Alan, you know the drill. Tell the people they can find you.
Saunders_PGH on X, Instagram, and TikTok. PGH Steelers Now's sites account, SteelersNow.com. Go there, read the words so I can get paid. Use promo code Allen10 to get 10% off an annual subscription. And works out to be about $4 a month. And it's well worth it. You get not only the best stuff from me and DB, but an ad-free reading experience. And of course, like, subscribe, hit that bell for notifications here on the YouTube platform so you don't miss a thing from Morning Rush, Afternoon Drive, Sights and Sounds, post-game, locker room interviews, all the good stuff.
And anything else that kind of falls into the miscellaneous bucket. Also,
what else do you guys want? Let me know what's something that you would like that you're not getting from the Steelers Now YouTube channel / audio feed world. What else is out there? What more do you want? Let us know. Always want to know what you want. And of course, if you got questions for me and Smitty, this feels like a good week to take some questions. And then I'm always into reader audience topics for Morning Rush.
Yeah, and especially if you started out by complimenting both of us, the show in general, the work at the site, anything like that, that'll typically be the way to get your foot in the door. So be sure to do that. Leave us a 5-star review and subscribe. If you're listening somewhere else, Apple, Spotify, wherever you get your podcast from, just search Steelers Afternoon Drive and you'll find us over there, just like you'll find us on TikTok, also at Steelers Afternoon Drive. And then you'll find me everywhere, Zachary Smith, PGH, for Alan Saunders and myself. Thanks for jumping in and taking another ride on the Steelers Afternoon Drive.